What happens when your own child sells the family home without your permission? Evelyn's answer wasn't to give up, but to move right next door and change everything. What happened next left the whole neighborhood stunned. Evelyn never imagined her life's roots could be severed in a single afternoon. She had lived in the stately White House on Maple Avenue for over 50 years. Her late husband George had laid every brick with his own hands. Their children Marcus and Lily had learned to ride their bikes in the driveway, scraped their knees on the old stone steps, and buried time capsules in the backyard beneath the sprawling oak tree. That home was more than walls and memories, it was the family's anchor, the stage for every chapter of their lives. After George's passing, Evelyn stayed on, tending to the garden and welcoming her grandchildren for weekend visits. Marcus, now in his 40s and busy with a family of his own, visited less often, but always promised that the house would remain in the family forever. "This is our legacy, Mom," he'd say, patting her shoulder with a distracted smile. Evelyn clung to those words. She trusted him. Then, without warning, everything changed. It started with a strange car idling at the curb one morning. Evelyn, pruning her roses, watched two well-dressed strangers step out, clipboards in hand, gazing up at the house and taking notes. She wondered if they were lost, perhaps realtors scoping out the neighborhood. When she asked if they needed help, they only smiled politely and said, "We'll be in touch." That afternoon Marcus arrived. He seemed jittery, avoiding her eyes as he helped himself to coffee. There was no mention of the strangers. Instead, he launched into a rehearsed speech about streamlining finances and preparing for the future. Evelyn tried to follow his words, but they twisted in her ears. "The market is good right now, Mom. Maybe it's time to think about downsizing." She brushed him off. She wasn't ready to leave, and besides, she was healthy and independent. The subject was dropped, but an uneasy feeling lingered. Days later, a letter arrived, thick, official, stamped with a logo from a local real estate firm. Inside, Evelyn's eyes widened as she read the words. "This notice is to inform you that your property at 114 Maple Avenue has been sold, effective immediately. Please contact our office to arrange a move-out date." Evelyn's heart raced. She called Marcus in a panic and he finally confessed. "Mom, I had to do it. The taxes, the upkeep, it's too much for you. I thought you'd be happy to move somewhere easier." He'd signed all the papers as the power of attorney, never asking, never warning, never once considering that she might want to stay. Evelyn was stunned, betrayed, and suddenly terrifyingly rootless. Within days, buyers appeared for viewings, their footsteps echoing through the halls, their voices cold as they pointed out what they'd renovate. Evelyn began packing, her hands trembling as she wrapped up family photos and keepsakes. The neighbors, some sympathetic, some nosy, watched from behind their curtains. The night before her final move-out, Evelyn walked through the empty house, touching the faded wallpaper, the etched doorframe with her children's heights penciled year after year. She ended up on the porch, staring at the neighbor's house, the Coopers who had just moved to Florida and left their place vacant, a for sale sign out front, barely noticed in her grief. A new determination sparked in Evelyn's heart. She phoned her old friend Helen, a local real estate agent who'd always admired Evelyn's resilience. "Do you think I could buy the Coopers' house?" she asked, voice trembling but clear. Helen, surprised but supportive, promised to find out. Evelyn spent a sleepless night at her daughter Lily's apartment, clutching the old photo album and praying for a miracle. The next morning Helen called with unexpected news. "The Coopers are eager to sell, and at a good price. If you want it, it's yours." As the sun rose over Maple Avenue, Evelyn stared at her old house, watching as movers carried out the last of her things. In her chest, a mix of sadness and resolve grew. If she couldn't keep her home, she would not let Marcus or anyone else erase her from the street she loved. With a deep breath, she turned to Helen and said, "Let's do it." The world had tried to uproot her, but Evelyn was not done fighting for her place in it. Evelyn awoke at Lily's apartment feeling as if she were floating in someone else's life. She moved through the morning in a daze, haunted by the hollow ache of losing her home. Lily, worried but preoccupied with her own busy life, handed Evelyn a mug of tea and scrolled through emails, promising they would figure something out soon. But Evelyn knew that time was running out. Every moment her old house sat empty, the more strangers would make it theirs. Helen, her friend and real estate agent, called with updates throughout the day. "The Coopers want a quick sale, Evelyn. They trust you'll care for their house the way you did your own." The bank paperwork moved swiftly, and soon Evelyn found herself signing contracts in Helen's office, the smell of coffee and old paper filling the air. Helen gripped her hand in congratulations, but Evelyn's smile was bittersweet. On moving day, Evelyn watched her belongings, now a bit more battered, being carted across the street to the Coopers' vacant home. It felt surreal. She could see her old porch from the new one, the flower beds she'd tended for decades, the wind chimes her grandchildren had made. She felt the sting of exile, but stubborn as ever, she refused to let the pain claim her. Instead, she unpacked with trembling determination, placing each photograph, each trinket, with care. The neighbor's house would not be her old home, but it would be hers. Across the way, Evelyn saw new cars arrive in her driveway, strangers stepping onto her porch, laughing as they toured the rooms, making plans to get the kitchen, tear out the garden, and modernize everything. Marcus stopped by, his face pale and drawn. He tried to explain again how hard things had been, how he thought he was helping. But Evelyn could not bear to hear it. "You didn't even ask me," she said quietly. "You took away my choice." Marcus tried to offer support. "Maybe this new place will be good for you, Mom." Evelyn turned away, tears threatening, and began tending to her new flower beds. She dug her hands into the dirt, planting cuttings from her old garden, bringing over seeds she'd saved from George's favorite roses. Her movements were precise, almost ritualistic, as if with every new plant she could stitch the street's history back together. Word quickly spread through Maple Avenue. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles and sympathetic glances. Mrs. Tran brought lemon bars. Mr. Gallagher offered to fix a squeaky window. People whispered about the audacity of Marcus's decision and marveled at Evelyn's determination to stay. Some admitted they wished they had her courage. The first night in her new home, Evelyn wandered from room to room, feeling the echo of the Coopers' lives and the absence of her own. But as the sun set and the street lights flickered on, she pulled a rocking chair onto the porch, just as she had done for decades. She sipped tea and watched the shadows dance on the house across the street, her house, and made a silent vow. If she couldn't live inside her memories, she would watch over them from next door. The next day brought new routines. Evelyn greeted the new owners of her former home, a young couple with a toddler and a dog, brimming with energy and plans. She welcomed them politely, hiding the ache behind her practiced smile. They thanked her for her gardening advice and asked if she knew the story behind the initials carved in the big oak out back. "That was me and George," Evelyn said softly, her voice distant. "A lifetime ago." In the weeks that followed, Evelyn made her presence known. She invited neighbors for coffee, organized a small block party, and offered cuttings from her old rose bushes to anyone interested. Slowly, her new house began to feel familiar. The porch was soon lined with potted plants, wind chimes, and even the old welcome mat she had rescued from Marcus's donation pile. But beneath the cheerful bustle was a quiet resolve. Evelyn watched Marcus come and go from her old home, sometimes with Lily or the grandchildren. He tried to make small talk, to repair what he had broken, but the hurt lingered. He noticed the gatherings at Evelyn's new house, the way neighbors gravitated to her, the slow but unmistakable transformation of the Coopers' home into Evelyn's new sanctuary. One afternoon, Evelyn received a letter in her mailbox, anonymous, typed, and signed. It simply read, "You inspire us all. Never let anyone decide your home for you." Evelyn smiled, folding the note and tucking it into her journal. She looked across the street at the house she'd lost, then back at her own front door. Her heart still ached, but a new sense of pride began to grow. She had lost her house, but not her spirit. And as autumn settled over Maple Avenue, Evelyn knew her story there was far from over. The weeks that followed brought both challenge and growth. As the golden leaves fell across Maple Avenue, Evelyn threw herself into transforming the Coopers' house into something that finally felt like her own. She scoured flea markets for vintage lamps, hung her family's portraits on the staircase, and painted the kitchen the same soft yellow George had once chosen. The act of creating, of rebuilding room by room, became her silent rebellion, a way to reclaim dignity and history from loss. But the reminders of her old life never faded. Every morning she watched the new family bustling about her former porch. The little boy, Sam, chased the dog along the path she'd edged with lavender. His mother waved to Evelyn as she watered her new garden. They were kind, almost reverent of the spaces past, often asking Evelyn about the quirks of the house. She tried to answer graciously, but every question stung, a reminder of all that had been decided without her. Meanwhile, the neighborhood's opinion had quietly turned in Evelyn's favor. Her story traveled in whispers from doorstep to doorstep, coloring conversations and deepening old friendships. Mrs. Tran stopped by nearly every afternoon, bringing stories and fresh dumplings. Even Mr. Gallagher, who'd rarely spoken more than a few words in years, began lingering on his walks, eager to hear about Evelyn's progress on her vegetable beds. Yet the wounds with Marcus festered. He continued to visit occasionally, always with gifts: fresh bread from the bakery, a bottle of her favorite tea, a stack of photos from family trips. He hoped that time and small gestures might mend the break between them. But Evelyn, though always polite, kept him at arm's length. The house sale had not just shifted addresses, it had shifted trust, and both knew it. One Saturday, a misunderstanding flared tempers. Marcus arrived to see his children playing in Evelyn's new yard, giggling as they planted tulip bulbs. He pulled Evelyn aside, his voice tense. "I appreciate what you're doing for the kids, Mom, but I hope you're not filling their heads with ideas. They're just starting to settle in at the old house. I need them to accept it." Evelyn bristled. "They're just helping me in the garden, Marcus. They know where their home is, but they miss what we all lost." The conversation turned sour, each word chipping at the wall between them. Evelyn saw tears in her granddaughter's eyes as Marcus raised his voice. Realizing the moment was slipping away, Evelyn knelt by the children, wiping their cheeks and telling a story about planting hope wherever you go. Later that night, Evelyn poured her thoughts into her journal. She wrote about grief, about change, about how roots could be severed and still find new earth. She wondered if Marcus would ever understand how deeply the sale had wounded her, how it felt to have her future decided behind closed doors. A week later, a strange package arrived on Evelyn's porch. Inside was a battered, old mailbox, the one George had built, which Marcus had replaced years before. Tucked inside was a note: "I thought you might want this back. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't realize what I was taking from you." Evelyn ran her hand over the faded paint, remembering all the letters, bills, and love notes that had passed through it. She set it up by her own new walkway, anchoring her past on the doorstep of her new present. That evening she sat on her porch as twilight settled, neighbors waving as they walked by, the children's laughter drifting on the breeze. Evelyn watched her old house, the lights warm in the windows, and realized she could cherish her memories without being owned by them. The rift with Marcus remained, but the roots she'd planted, both in the garden and in her heart, were beginning to take hold. Autumn deepened on Maple Avenue, and with each passing day, Evelyn's new life took firmer root. The house that had once felt borrowed began to exude her warmth, a kitchen always filled with the aroma of baking bread, a front stoop adorned with pumpkins and chrysanthemums, windows glowing with the gentle light of family lamps. It was not the house she had built with George, but in every detail she added, it became a testament to her endurance. Despite her efforts, the ache of separation lingered. Some mornings, she woke in confusion, expecting to see her old bedroom ceiling or hear the creak of familiar floorboards. But as soon as she opened the curtains and saw the steady stream of life on Maple Avenue, she remembered her vow: to watch over her memories, not be trapped by them. Her resolve was tested one blustery afternoon when she saw the new family struggling to rake the yard. The young mother, Sarah, tried to corral her son and the dog, their laughter mingling with the wind. Something inside Evelyn softened. She crossed the street, rake in hand, and offered to help. Sarah beamed, grateful, and together they worked in companionable silence, the old and the new intertwined. Later, Sarah invited Evelyn in for tea. Inside, Evelyn saw the familiar shapes of her old life: the fireplace where she and George had spent winter evenings, the window seat where Marcus used to read, the kitchen table, now covered with the fingerprints of a new generation. Instead of bitterness, Evelyn felt a deep sense of continuity. She realized that, though she no longer lived there, the house would go on shaping stories for another family. Sarah confided her own anxieties. "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in someone else's memories," she admitted. "It's overwhelming trying to live up to everything this house has meant." Evelyn squeezed her hand. "You're not erasing anything. You're adding to it. That's how homes become what they are, layer by layer, family by family." Word of their blossoming friendship spread. Soon, other neighbors began to lean on Evelyn's experience. She found herself offering gardening advice, sharing recipes, and recounting the history of the street at block gatherings. Children came to her for cookies and stories about the great oak tree and the secret hiding spots only she knew. Even Mr. Gallagher, ever the stoic, asked for help repairing a leaky faucet, an excuse to linger over coffee and memories. Meanwhile, Evelyn's own home flourished. She painted the living room walls a cheerful blue, hung lace curtains in the kitchen, and sewed new cushions for the porch swing. She invited Lily over for supper, and they talked for hours, the rift between mother and daughter slowly healing. Lily confessed, "I wish Marcus had handled things differently, but I'm proud of how you landed on your feet." But not all wounds healed so easily. Marcus remained distant, visiting his children but rarely staying to talk. When he did come by, his manner was stiff as if unsure of his welcome. Evelyn longed for reconciliation, but she knew it could not be forced. She would have to let time do its work, just as she had with her new garden. Then one rainy night, a crisis forced their hands. Sarah's little boy slipped and twisted his ankle, and Marcus happened to be there picking up his own kids from Evelyn's. He rushed to help, comforting the child as Sarah panicked. In the rush, Evelyn and Marcus locked eyes, the old understanding flickering between them. Later, as the crisis passed and the child was safely bandaged, Evelyn poured Marcus a cup of tea. They sat in silence, the weight of the past between them, until Marcus finally spoke. "I was wrong, Mom. I thought I was protecting you, but I only hurt you. I'm sorry." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "We both lost something, Marcus. But I never lost my love for you." The walls began to crumble. With the neighborhood as witness, the two found a cautious path back to one another. As Evelyn watched the rain streak the windows, she felt something shift inside her. She was no longer just a woman displaced, she was a neighbor, a mother, a friend. And with every act of kindness, she stitched herself further into the fabric of Maple Avenue. Winter descended on Maple Avenue, bringing with it sharp winds, quiet nights, and the hush of snow blanketing the old trees. From her kitchen window, Evelyn watched the world turn silver and white. The familiar ache in her chest softened as she realized how much her new house, once so alien, now felt like home. It was not just the walls and furniture, but the life she'd built. Neighbors dropping in with hot soup, children knocking for cookies, laughter spilling from her living room during card games. Sarah and her family across the street leaned on Evelyn more than ever as holidays approached. They borrowed her rolling pin for pie crusts, asked advice about hanging lights on the big oak, and invited her over for Sunday dinners. Sometimes Sarah would confide, "I still feel like I'm living in someone else's story." Evelyn always reassured her, "You're writing your own chapter. The house is lucky to have you." Evelyn also became a quiet force in the community. She started a tradition of hosting Saturday afternoon teas, inviting anyone feeling lonely or displaced. What began as a gathering for widows and empty nesters soon grew to include young parents, retirees, and even a handful of newcomers to the street. Stories were shared, secrets exchanged, recipes traded, and laughter echoed long into the winter nights. The sense of loss over her old house remained, but with every gathering, Evelyn saw the ripple of her presence, how her resilience inspired others. Mrs. Tran, once reclusive, began tutoring local children in math. Mr. Gallagher, who'd lost his wife years before, started a handyman club for the block. Even the youngest children came to call Evelyn Granny E, bringing her crafts and stories from school. But the wounds with Marcus still needed healing. He visited his children at Sarah's house and sometimes waved to Evelyn from the porch, his guilt visible in every glance. One snowy evening after dropping off the grandchildren, Marcus lingered outside Evelyn's gate. She saw him through the window standing uncertainly in the drifting snow, and went to meet him. They talked under the porch light, breath visible in the cold air. Marcus struggled to find words. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for, Mom. I know what I did was wrong. I was scared. I didn't want to lose you, but I lost your trust instead." Evelyn rested a gloved hand on his arm. "We can build that trust again. I never wanted a perfect life, Marcus. I just wanted to be part of the decisions that changed it." It was a long conversation filled with old regrets and new hopes. They spoke of George, of the childhood memories Marcus missed, and the lessons each had learned since the sale. Evelyn's forgiveness was not simple. It was layered with grief, disappointment, and finally, acceptance. But she offered it freely. Afterward, Marcus began to change. He visited more often, not just for the children but for Evelyn herself. He asked her opinion about work, brought her groceries, and even joined a Saturday tea or two, much to the delight of the neighbors. The children saw the difference. Family bonds, once frayed and tangled, began to mend. As the holiday season reached its peak, Evelyn found herself at the center of a community stronger and more loving than ever before. She stood on her porch one evening, lights twinkling, and looked across at her old house. She felt a bittersweet peace. She had been forced out, but she had built something lasting, something Marcus and her neighbors could see and cherish. She understood, finally, that home was not a building but a tapestry of relationships, kindnesses, and memories, woven every day wherever you choose to plant your heart. And Evelyn, once uprooted, had made Maple Avenue bloom again. Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, Maple Avenue awoke in a riot of color. Crocuses poked through the last snowdrifts, daffodils lined every fence and the trees, especially the grand old oak, burst into bud. Evelyn watched the world come back to life from her porch swing, a cup of tea in hand, a blanket across her knees. The ache of what she'd lost remained, but it was softer now, edged with the gentle sweetness of what she'd rebuilt. She poured her energy into her garden, turning the once neat beds of the Cooper's house into a wild and joyful sprawl. Roses and peonies from cuttings she'd saved mingled with new blooms. She planted a sapling oak in the backyard, a living link to the tree she'd loved across the street. Neighbors often stopped to chat while she worked, and children helped plant seeds, their hands muddy and faces bright with pride. Evelyn noticed Sarah and her husband settling more confidently into their home. The little boy, Sam, learned to ride his bike in the same driveway Marcus and Lily once did, and Sarah painted a mural in his bedroom, incorporating the initials carved into the old oak. Evelyn was touched beyond words when she was asked to add her own, an unbroken line of memory connecting past and present. That spring, Evelyn proposed a new tradition, a neighborhood picnic in her backyard. She sent handwritten invitations, and on the chosen Saturday, the block came alive with laughter, tables loaded with food and music drifting on the breeze. Sarah brought her famous lemonade, Lily arrived with homemade pie, and even Marcus surprised everyone by manning the grill. Evelyn's grandchildren helped organize games for the little ones, and the picnic stretched into evening as lanterns glowed beneath the trees. Evelyn took a quiet moment to look around, children darting between rose bushes, neighbors sharing stories, Marcus and Lily laughing together, and felt the completeness she'd once feared would never return. Her old home was still visible from her new backyard, but for the first time, it did not seem to taunt her. Instead, it stood as a testament to everything she had overcome. Later that week, Marcus visited Evelyn, helping her plant the last of the spring bulbs. As they worked, he spoke quietly. "I know I can't undo what happened, Mom, but I hope you know I've learned from it. I'm proud of you, of how you built something new." Evelyn squeezed his hand. "We both did. Life doesn't always give us the endings we want, but sometimes it gives us second chances." Their bond, once strained nearly to breaking, was finally healing. Marcus stayed for dinner, sharing stories about work and the children, lingering long after dusk. As he left, he hugged Evelyn tightly. "Thank you for not giving up on us." The days grew longer, and Evelyn found herself not just welcomed but cherished by her neighbors. She became the unofficial historian of Maple Avenue, telling tales of the street's early days, sharing gardening tips, and listening to the dreams and worries of the younger families. She even started a journal, capturing the stories she'd gathered, determined that no one else's memories would be erased without a fight. Through it all, Evelyn realized that her greatest weapon had never been resistance or bitterness. It was the quiet, persistent act of showing up every day with kindness, hope, and the courage to start again. Her roots ran deep, no matter which patch of earth she called home. Summer settled on Maple Avenue, sunlight pooling in the gardens and laughter echoing from porches long into the evening. Evelyn, now fully at home in her house next door, felt the street transform around her, a place of second chances, healing, and unexpected joy. The garden she'd nurtured was in full bloom, a wild riot of color and fragrance. Sarah's son, Sam, dashed back and forth between houses, now as comfortable at Evelyn's as his own. Sarah and her husband had begun inviting Evelyn to family meals, and more than once she found herself at her old kitchen table, sharing stories, the past no longer a shadow but a gentle companion. As summer approached its peak, Evelyn proposed another neighborhood tradition, a midsummer block party. She and Sarah co-hosted, stringing lights from the new oak sapling to the fence, and inviting every family from the block. Tables were set up in the street, groaning with potluck dishes, lemonade, and pies. Children played tag beneath the trees, while the older neighbors swapped tales of Maple Avenue's history. For Evelyn, the party was more than celebration. It was homecoming in the truest sense. Marcus brought his children, this time staying for hours, helping set up games, laughing easily with old friends. He and Evelyn worked the grill together, their teamwork smooth and wordless, years of strain replaced by a new respect. As dusk fell and the first stars blinked overhead, Marcus hugged his mother and whispered, "You were right, Mom. It was never about the house. It was about us." Lily, too, had found healing, often stopping by for afternoon tea or to help Evelyn with projects around the house. The rift that had grown in the aftermath of the sale was slowly mending, replaced by a deeper understanding of the ties that held them all together. At the party's end, as lanterns flickered and neighbors began to drift home, Evelyn stood at the curb, looking at the two houses, the one she had lost and the one she had remade. Instead of sorrow, she felt only gratitude. The roots she'd planted in her new yard had taken hold, but the real roots, those of love, memory and family, spanned the entire street. That night, as she sat on her porch, sipping tea and listening to the quiet, Evelyn wrote in her journal, "Home is not just a place but the people who fill it with laughter, forgiveness and the promise to begin again. I lost my house but I found my life." The journey had been painful, the lessons hard-won, but Evelyn had turned loss into something beautiful. Maple Avenue, once the site of her deepest hurt, was now her greatest victory. And as fireflies danced in the garden, she knew she was exactly where she belonged. The first crisp days of autumn arrived, scattering gold and crimson leaves across Maple Avenue. Evelyn watched from her porch swing, the morning sun warming her face, and marveled at how much had changed in a single year. The house next door, her old home, looked different now but no longer felt like a wound. Instead, it was a part of her story as much as the new house she'd claimed for her own. She filled her days with purpose. The Saturday teas continued, now a cherished ritual for neighbors old and new. Sam often visited after school, eager to help in the garden or hear a story from the old days. Even Sarah's husband, once reserved, would drop by for advice or a quick chat about lawn care. Evelyn found herself at the center of a web of friendships, respected, relied upon, and deeply loved. Marcus and Lily too had found their way back to their mother. Marcus visited often, helping with repairs or bringing the grandchildren to bake cookies and rake leaves. The tension and regret that once colored every word between them faded, replaced by easy laughter and moments of quiet understanding. Sometimes, when the children played in the yard, Marcus and Evelyn would sit side by side on the porch, not needing words to share their gratitude for this second chance. On the anniversary of her move, the neighborhood came together again. They held a home and harvest celebration in Evelyn's yard, feasting under the oaks and sharing stories. Sarah gave a toast, her voice trembling with affection. Evelyn taught us all that home is what we make of it, and that family is chosen every day. The neighbors raised their glasses and Evelyn, deeply moved, blinked back tears. Later that evening, Evelyn found herself alone in her living room, a cup of tea in hand. She looked around at the photographs on the mantel, the quilt draped over the sofa, the oak sapling visible from the window. Every detail told a story, not just of loss but of resilience, hope, and the power to begin again. She wrote her final journal entry for the year. "I thought I lost everything when I lost my home. But by refusing to disappear, by planting new roots and opening my door, I found a family bigger than I could ever have imagined. My life's legacy isn't in walls or windows, it's in every hand I've held, every kindness given, and every neighbor I've welcomed in. I'm still here. I am home." The next morning, a new family moved onto Maple Avenue. Evelyn was the first to greet them, pie in hand, her smile wide and genuine. She showed them where the best sunlight hit the porch, where the soil was softest for planting, and how the street came alive every spring. As she returned home, she glanced at her old house and then at her own, side by side, two chapters in a story still unfolding. The ache was gone, replaced by peace. Whatever happened next, Evelyn knew she'd face it not with fear, but with the quiet certainty that her roots ran deep, across lawns, hearts, and generations. On Maple Avenue, her legacy would blossom for years to come.